Hey, what's up? It's Comic95, the Savior. So for this video, I'm doing a continuation on my series on how to teach your own private English lessons and get your own students here in Japan. So, one of the biggest things that have probably come across your mind if you're going into this seriously, whether you live in Japan or you're still living abroad, is how exactly do you conduct these lessons? So what should they consist of? How do you teach? What materials do you use? What do you talk about, etc.? It seems very overwhelming at first, and to be honest, that feeling kind of never truly goes away. And here's the reason why. You're always going to be dealing with students that come from different backgrounds, not necessarily their race and or ethnicity, because I hate to sound racist, but just being real, I only teach Japanese students. You'll find that when you have students from other countries, they're just trying to date you, they're a lot less serious, and you deal with difficulties in getting them to pay you. So I strictly only teach Japanese students. But off of that, you have students that have different English abilities and different goals for, studying, what they want to accomplish. And because of that, some students will want to use written materials, some students will bring their own books, some students want to have strictly, conversation, with you. So you really need to consider what your student wants and not what's more comfortable for you or necessarily what you're used to using. If you are someone that works in Japan and you're probably used to working at an eikaiwa or an international school in which you've always had a curriculum. Maybe you've never planned lessons before, maybe you've never taught adults, maybe you've never dealt with, high school students, etc. This will all be brand new to you. So in order to teach these lessons, it's very important that you stay well versed in a lot of different areas. You want to constantly be looking out for new curriculums, books, textbooks, etc. and make sure that you stay at your local bookstore and library and constantly look at the new, Aiken Prep books and TOEIC books, as well as, any type of English teaching curriculums. For example, some really popular ones here are definitely things like Super Kids and Smart English, Time Zones. Those are very popular books that I personally use myself and most eikaiwa schools also use. Don't be afraid to implement these materials. You don't have to necessarily have these textbooks on hand with you. You can actually get illegal but free ebook versions of them, and you can print them off from home or even your job. If you don't want to do that, which I don't necessarily recommend doing that, you can simply take inspiration from them. I personally have used these books, etc., and I found things that I felt were being taught incorrectly, and I simply made it better by taking it from, that source, making it my own, and making it better, more detailed, making the grammar, etc. correct. So don't be afraid to take inspiration from different places. Please excuse the loudness. There's actually a typhoon going on right now. I'm fine, don't worry. Anyway, so yeah, you want to get materials from a lot of different places, a variety of places, because you don't want to just stick with one book. You'll eventually run out of material. Maybe your student doesn't like everything from that. Maybe your student has already used these materials, etc. You also want to keep in mind that most of your students are going to be salarymen and women with a mix of some college students and or high schoolers. College students and high schoolers are not as stable of students because obviously money is tight for them, so you really want to market yourself more so towards the adults. People that are planning to go abroad for business or that simply want to date, hang out, and befriend foreigners to be cool. Those are the students that you're going to have that are going to want to stay with you for months and months and or years and years. These are the students that you really want to have in mind when you're planning your lessons. And with that said, it's really important that you stay well versed in the media. Regardless of where you come from, most people are very interested in American pop culture, and with that said, it's really important that you know what's going on within the US as well as in Japan. Don't be afraid to ask them for their opinion. These are great conversation starters because, again, it can go on forever. The news is always being updated every single day. You're both informing yourself as a person and learning new stuff. You're also, getting your students' opinion, and they're from another country. They're Japanese. So you get to see what they really think and feel about stuff. I personally learned a whole lot about Okinawa by simply asking my students, hey, what did you do on vacation? How was your trip? Why do you think Japanese people like going here? Why do people do this? And then I found out, oh, apparently Okinawa has a dark side to it, which I will talk about in a totally separate video. We're going to stay on topic here. But again, the lesson becomes really fun and it goes by super fast. You just made $30, $40 just for asking questions about Japan. So now you're getting information and they're practicing their English. It's a win-win situation. I also do not recommend asking the students what their goals are before you meet. I never ask them what their English ability is, nor do I ask them what, their goals are for learning English or their purpose until we have our trial lesson. This is best saved for the trial lesson for a few reasons. One, normally your trial lesson is either going to cost less money, or even if you're charging the same amount, but especially if you're charging less, this is a shaky student. You don't know if they're going to like you and or keep you. And with that said, you want to make the lesson as simple as possible. And the way to make it as simple as possible is to fill in time by asking questions. So if you haven't already asked them, oh, where do you work? Where do you live? How old are you? Do you have family? Do you have whatever? These are great conversation starters, icebreakers, if you will, for your very first lesson. Of course, as I've already recommended, I highly suggest that you take the lead and that you tell them about yourself first before asking them. It'll make them less nervous, less shy, and always be sure to talk quietly. You don't want to have a loud voice. You don't want to seem overwhelming, overbearing, and too outgoing. This will scare your student. The last thing that they want is to feel embarrassed because they don't know the right English words to use, or because you're talking really loud and it becomes really obvious that they're paying for your company, especially if this particular person pretty much only chose you because you were hot. So, that also brings me to another point to make. To be totally honest, you don't have to stress out so much because the reality is your student probably chose you because you were attractive. Whether you're dealing with, a guy or a girl, whether they're straight, gay, whatever they happen to be, which more than likely they're probably going to be straight, they chose you because you're attractive. They liked your interests that you had in your profile, etc. So with that said, you don't really have to try so hard. They're happy to be in your company. They're basically going on a date. This is some lonely housewife, some lonely salaryman, whatever. For them, this is fun. Of course, they can also still move on to someone that's more attractive or just, test the waters with a new teacher. So you do want to try to keep them as a student by giving a great first impression, but you also don't need to stress out over this lesson so much. It's just a trial lesson. However, again, going past your trial lesson and dealing with your regular day-to-day lessons, as you get to know your student, it will become repetitive. You can't keep saying the same thing like, oh, what did you do yesterday? How was your weekend? These are great questions to start each lesson, but in order to make it last for that full hour, or if it's a 2-hour lesson, you want to have things that are more individual and specific to your student. And by this, I mean, you want to know what your student's goal is. So for example, if your English student is trying to practice English for their job, maybe they are a pharmacist or they're a doctor. They probably have patients that, tell them what hurts or tell them about, their pain or what medications they take. You want to think of what kind of questions does your doctor ask you? What are things that can, come up during a typical physical in your home country? You want to give them the needed vocabulary. You also want to help your student learn how to nicely and properly and appropriately ask these questions. For example, some things get lost in translation, as well as some things simply sound rude. For example, being asked to pay money, you do this now, you give me. It sounds demanding and very Yakuza Mafia style type. Instead, you want to teach them more formal ways, like, can we make a payment plan? How would you like to pay today? Things like that. So teaching them better English, better, more appropriate ways to answer these questions. I actually have a lot of students that are doctors, as well as I've had a handful of students that are engineers and that have done, work with people from different countries. And when I listen to what they have to say, and when I read their emails that they've had me proofread, I'm like, whoa, this is super rude. Now, of course, there's going to be some leniency because they know that they're dealing with someone that's not a native speaker, but in defense of Japan, Americans kind of aren't as sensitive to those that don't speak English at a native level, and unfortunately things can be taken personally. So, these are important things to teach, and again, do not underestimate using pop culture, media, news, etc. Talk about politics. Don't get too political by giving your 2 cents on everything, but ask your student. You want to get them to talk. So for example, say, hey, such and such happened with Trump. Did you hear about this? This is going on with LGBT, this about abortion, gun violence, whatever. What's your opinion on this? What do you think Japanese people think about this? You want to get your student to talk and get them to think in English. These are great conversation starters, and because politics, news, etc., things are always changing. There's always new celebrities, there's always new concerts. Ask them about Japanese culture. Say, hey, I do this. Why don't Japanese people bring groceries on the train? Is this not appropriate to do in Japan? ask your questions to your student. These are great conversation starters and excellent for lessons in Japan. So again, for your students that want to strictly practice conversation, they more than likely will have their own things to talk about on their own because they probably already speak English very well. But in the event or tragic case or whatever that they do not, you most certainly can do this easily by simply keeping up with the media, keeping up with music, the news, movies. Japanese people love American movies. Don't be afraid to talk about Japanese shows. They love it when you're interested in their culture. They love to talk about Japan. They love to educate foreigners, especially if it's an older Japanese man or woman. So do not be afraid to use this lesson as free information for yourself too. It's a win-win situation. I promise you I do this to this day all the time. And it has helped me out tremendously because it helps me make my videos. I get inside information that my friends might not feel comfortable at answering, but my student is more than willing to share what Japanese people really think about something or how people really view this. Even if they're not being 100% honest, again, it's getting them to talk and think in English. And it's also an interesting twist because they're thinking of something that's Japanese, but in English. So that is your goal. The other thing that I want to emphasize is beyond just, using these books and materials, etc. And you don't have to even purchase them, you guys. You can literally take pictures at your bookstore, take notes, in a notebook or whatever. And of course, they have them where you can download the internet version of it, just download the book online. But what was I about to say? I'm sorry, I'm actually losing focus. There's actually a spider on my wall, but I'm trying to keep it cool. Okay, I've collected myself. But the other thing that you really want to do is make your own curriculum. So I kind of talked about this by, me telling you that, oh, look, you should look into things like Super Kids and Time Zones and Smart English, etc. These books, as well as the various Aiken Prep and TOEIC Prep books, and really become familiar with, those tests and what exactly do they consist of. Because you will have a lot of students that are trying to practice English in order to pass these tests, in order to go to a good college, a good high school, and or to get a promotion at their job or for their overseas business trip, and or to simply help out their resume. So what I really recommend doing is creating a really good PowerPoint. I have a PowerPoint that has over 200 slides and I'm always adding more and more stuff. It is categorized and I'm planning to make more PowerPoints as well. These PowerPoints teach them various things from both work as well as day-to-day life. It does not just teach them new English vocabulary, but it also teaches them things like slang and idioms and metaphors and how we do stuff culturally. So for example, cultural differences, like from shaking hands to hugging, when it's appropriate, how we talk to people, different ways to introduce yourself and talk about your interests. For example, in Japan and pretty much any other English-speaking or non-English-speaking country, people are taught to say things like, oh, best regards, or dear such and such. We do not write that in emails. That is something that a non-native English speaker will write, or someone that does not have a very good grasp on how to be professional. It's really weird, really robotic. That's not how we talk to each other, especially not when you're speaking to this person on a day-to-day basis. If you're constantly saying, dear Rin, best regards, kind of robotic, kind of weird. We also do not say hobbies. I will not say, oh, what are your hobbies? Instead, I'll say, what do you like to do? What are you into? What do you do for fun? What do you do in your off time? What do you like to do, during, for leisure, whatever. Stuff like that. Teach them those types of phrases. It seems so simple to you, but for them, they're like, oh, I've never heard that before. I didn't know that people don't say hobbies. Really? You don't say best regards? You don't say dear such and such? And so of course you teach them that yes, we do, but there's a time and place for these things. And to be totally honest, I can't even remember the last time that I wrote a letter starting with dear or best regards. This is something that I would write to my students at my day job at my international school if I'm talking to all of the parents or something. But this is kind of weird to send to people that you work with on a day-to-day basis. The other great thing about using a PowerPoint or having a slideshow is that you can also have Japanese translations of important, information such as the vocabulary words. You can have pictures inserted. These things are really useful for students that have low English levels and abilities because, and this is a big reason why you want to bring your computer, because you don't know what their true level is. Also keep in mind that even if you are a native speaker, especially if you are from somewhere like the UK or Australia, you may not have heard of this much, but most Japanese people cannot understand British or Aussie English. It sounds like an entirely different language to them. So with that said, you really want to rely on something like a computer. Unless your student has been to the UK or is planning to go there, they probably have not heard a lot of British English because most of what they see and watch is American English. And the little bit that they have seen and watched is totally different slang, accents that they've never, really heard much of. So, it's really important that you have material that your student can both read, look at, and kind of help them to understand, through pictures or through, a little bit of Japanese. Now, generally when you're working with Japanese students, they prefer to learn in an immersive environment where everything is strictly in English because it forces them to think and to speak in English and not to rely on the Japanese side of things. But the reality is, if your student has a very low English ability or low English level, you're gonna have to use a little bit of Japanese, or at least have something that they can read and or see in order to fully understand what you're talking about. I also highly recommend you encourage your student to use their phone, to use Google Translate, to use their electronic dictionary, and don't laugh or judge them for doing so. Make sure that you start off your lesson always reminding them that if they don't understand something, to please let you know. And make sure that you as a teacher are talking slowly and that you're giving them room to ask questions. Remember, this is their English lesson, so it's not about what you want to teach them or what you want them to learn. They should be the ones taking the lead. It is your job to obviously keep the conversation going, but it's your student's decision to choose what they want to learn. If your student decides today that they want to use, your PowerPoint, do it. If they decide next week that they just want to have a strictly, conversational English lesson, then do that. That's why you always need to be prepared. Every single week, you need to make an effort to read the news, to watch the news, to listen to new music, to watch new movies. You want to always be prepared to have a conversation with your student about stuff in English. It can be about Japanese stuff. That's totally cool. In fact, I kind of recommend that. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're keeping the conversation in English. It does not matter how well you speak Japanese. This is not the time to show off how well your Japanese speaking skills are. They're paying you for your gaijin-ness. They don't care that you can speak English. They might ask you, and more than likely a student that's asking you about your Japanese ability, they're not serious, they're trying to date you. These are the type of students that'll ask you, oh, can I buy you a meal instead of paying you for the lesson? You don't want these kind of students. So, that's that. Again, basically, long story short, the best way to teach your lesson is to, 1, use a variety of resources. There's bookstores, the convenience stores here even sell books in English. I forget the name of the place. Sutaya? I cannot say that name for the life of me. Sutaya, or however you say it. Freak. I'm sorry, you guys. I'll insert the links, etc. down below. But they have a wide selection of books. There's tons of bookstores. You don't have to go there. You can even go to, I think it's called Book Off or whatever that second hand-me-down store is, but they generally sell manga and stuff. I'm thinking of the wrong store name. There's so many store names here. Something that starts with a K. It's not coming to mind. Anyway, long story short, you can go to any bookstore here. They have tons of curriculums. You can search online, Amazon, Japan. They all have them. And if you work here, you can literally, that's what I do, take pictures of the books at your job, search them, download them, buy them. And beyond just that, don't just go strictly off of your book. You don't want to be a robot. Read the books yourself. Do not wait until you're having the lesson. Read them and look at them and see, they could do this better. This would be better. I think they should have added that. Think of it that way. Do not limit yourself by just using one book or just using one website. Use a variety of materials and don't be afraid to borrow. Take materials from these books, make them your own, add more to them. That's how you create your lessons. Same thing goes for teaching in regular school. You get inspiration from different teachers, from Pinterest, etc., and you kind of put them all together, make your own lesson plans, create your own designs and decorations for your classroom, art projects, etc. So again, I'm sorry this got so long-winded, etc., but make sure that you create a PowerPoint that teaches them different cultural aspects of English. So ways that we say stuff, slang, etc., that gives scenarios that they might have, as well as reteach them things that they think they know, such as how to introduce themselves, how to talk about stuff, being more specific, using adjectives, how to use particles, why we say I'm at, or I'm in, or I'm on something. Teach them different things like that inside your PowerPoint. The second thing is, obviously, you want to make sure that you have books and materials to be used. You don't necessarily have to bring these physical books there, but you want to read over them and maybe add that to your PowerPoint. Or you can bring them too. Again, different students want different things. They expect to have different things from their lesson. And then third, beyond that, you really want to make sure that you stay well versed in what's going on in the news, media, etc. Don't be afraid, again, to ask your student what they want to learn. You should be asking them that. Let them take the lead. Take the pressure off of yourself and let your student decide all of the stuff for you. Your job is literally just to be the English speaking person that understands what they're saying. You're just a human being. They are the ones that are going to be doing the talking. So you do not need to worry about, trying to come up with 50,000 things. Your job is literally to ask questions that require long answers. Things that can't be answered with a yes or no. So for example, do Japanese people like, Pop-Tarts? No. Ask them, why don't Japanese people like Pop-Tarts? Oh, well, they're too sweet. We don't have anything like this. I've never had a Pop-Tart before. Oh, you've never had a Pop-Tart? Okay, let's search Pop-Tarts. Have you seen this before? Oh, Japanese people eat this. This is really similar to that. Something weird. Ask them about natto. Ask questions that keep the conversation going without you having to do it. You don't want it to be where you're the one having to carry on the conversation. You want it to be where they get to the point where they're so comfortable talking to you, they're enjoying this conversation, then now you have to tell them, whoa, we're going overtime, wrapping up this lesson, or do you want to stay for another hour? That's how you want it to be. You don't want to stress out over or be thinking, oh my God, what am I going to say next? No, let your student do it. And eventually, by the second or third lesson, your student will have exactly what they want to say already planned out. You won't have to think. They'll be excited to tell you about what they saw on TV, about their travel plans, about what they did at work last week, etc. And in case I confused you, be sure that at the beginning of your lessons, you always start off asking basic stuff. Ask them how are they, ask them how was their day, ask them what they did at work, ask them if anything special happened in their life basically throughout that past week. This kills at least about 5 to 10 minutes right there. So don't overthink it. And then after that, then you can get into your, PowerPoints. You can get into, any questions that they might have had about work when they dealt with a foreign company or, whatever. So again, don't overdo it. Don't overthink it. It's not as hard as it seems. It's something that you really have to do. Me telling you this, it sounds really hard. It seems really complicated, but it's really not. You just have to experience it yourself, and you will get the hang of it. You will come up with better ideas as you go along. You don't have to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect. You will have students that will have your lesson and absolutely hate it. They might feel like it's overpriced, whatever, and they won't reschedule or book you again. You also have students that, you make you think you were bad, but really the student was just looking for a date, and they realize that you're a little bit serious and they can't get you to accept food as payment or a love hotel or whatever. So you'll have bad students, you'll have mostly good ones. Don't expect them to stay. See this as experience, and at the end of the day, you got paid for your time if nothing else. So don't stress out over it. So that is that. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a like. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please also leave a comment down below or send me an email if you have any other questions or video ideas that you would like to see. I have an entire playlist that gives advice on teaching your own private English lessons, as well as various blog posts and videos on how to work and live in Japan. So I highly recommend that you also check those videos and playlists out, as well as read those blog posts if you are curious, nervous, anxious, or whatever about working and or living here in Japan. Again, do not stress out. You won't become a good teacher overnight. It takes time. Your students are going to be shy, they're going to be timid, and they're worried about their English just as much as you are worried about how well you're going to teach them. So that's that. Thank you so much for watching. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter and Snapchat as well. So I'd appreciate it if you would also like and follow me on those too. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.